Welcome, everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. This is the monthly meetup to discuss Bhagavad Gita. If you're not familiar with Bhagavad Gita, you can read Bhagavad Gita. We have done a number of meetups on Bhagavad Gita. I think almost 100 meetups that you can get to in our YouTube. YouTube for 52 Living Ideas. We encourage you to do that. But we are going to invite people to talk about any topic in Bhagavad Gita that really speaks to them. You can pick a chapter, you can pick some verses from a chapter, you can pick an idea that really speaks to you. You can spend up to 5 minutes talking about it, putting it on the table, and then we will have a discussion about it, and then we'll go to the next one. We're going to start with Evanik, with chapter 18, verses 74 to 78. Then we'll go to Paul and his question of Tvam Asi, what is its meaning? Then we're going to go to Joe. He's going to be talking about chapter 3, verses 36. And then we'll go to Jyoti, who's going to be talking about chapter 6, verses 33 to 47. Anybody else who wants to put something on the table, you're welcome to put the topic. You say that I want to discuss this in the chat, and then we will include it. So this is very leisurely way of discussing the Gita. It's very conversational. I would love to hear from everybody. And when you want to speak, just go ahead and type exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. All right, let's get started. First up is Evanik. Go ahead, Evanik.
Thank you, Shrikant. I'm going to start with chapter 18, like you said, verse 74 to 78. I'm going to read it. Sanjaya said, I heard this wonderful discourse of Vasudeva and of the great salt Partha, causing my hair to stand on end. Through the grace of Vyasa, I heard this supreme secret, this yoga directly from Krishna, the divine master of yoga, who himself declared it. O king, remembering this wonderful and sacred discourse of Keshava and Arjuna, I rejoice again and again, remembering also the most marvelous form of Hari. Great is my wonder, O king, I rejoice again and again. Wherever is Krishna, the master of yoga, wherever is Partha, the archer, assured they are their glory, victory, and prosperity. And there is also the immutable law of right. And I chose these verses because they were a part of the discussion of the end of Gita. And when I first read them, I wasn't quite sure of the meaning. But when Shrikant and Yogeshwar and others chimed in, it really did make a lot of sense. So I'll start with some highlights. So I think the concept around the conversation is what is reality. And, Yogeshwar and Shrikant both explained that this was the end of the book, this was the end of the war, and that Arjuna was ready to go to war. But I guess the question surrounding that is, why was he so sure now, as opposed to the beginning of the Gita when he had doubts? So Yogeshwar said the first part, which at first I was like, that really didn't go, but then as I listened, it really did. And it says not sharing the Gita with everyone, not sharing their conversation. There was a command, and the reason for that was that not everyone is able to accept it. And I thought about our conversation last night about the Gospel of John, and people not ready to accept Jesus. And it's the same concept, because people were not realizing that they were, by choosing the material world, they are turning away from God. and it's a choice that they're making. And Sheree Kant and I were having that conversation earlier, and basically it was, you know, the Christians use this concept of the devil as if it is a person. And the devil isn't a person per se, it's a material world. And for so people who don't accept the Gita, it's because they're wanting the fruits of their work rather than doing the work. So this concept, if Arjun had shared this story, this conversation with Krishna, with everybody, it would have fallen on deaf ears for the most part. And people would not have really understood it because they're not ready. Um, there is a comparable passage in the Bible. It says, "Do not throw pearls." I'm paraphrasing. Is that to not throw your pearls to pigs, and it just simply means not everybody's ready for a deep spiritual conversation. They have to basically, and it's not about intelligence. It's not about even educational level. It's about, are you ready? Are you seeking God? And that's a concept through all three of the works that we studied, the Gospel of John, the Gita, and the Tao Te Ching, is the concept of, are you seeking God? That's the people that will understand. That's the people that will be willing to learn and ask questions, are the people that are seeking God, or seeking something above. So I thought that was profound. And then Madhu had asked the question, is the Gita true? Is it a true story? And that was a great conversation as well, because Yogeshwar said, and the only way that you can know if the Gita is true for you is to test it out in your life, is to test these concepts in your life. And I have to tell you, it's so true, because in the beginning, I was just interested in the Gita as something I hadn't read. I was just curious. I didn't know anything about the Gita. I'll be honest, I don't think I really heard of the Gita until I met Sri Kant. Um, and he was talking about it. So I was like, okay, I'm interested. I'll see how it is. I wasn't even sure if I was going to do the whole series. Um, and I wound up doing the whole series because it was just fascinating and just grew. And I always remember Sherry Kant saying, "Oh, it's a very short book. It only take us a couple months to get through it," and it was a year-long series because it was just that deep and it was just that fascinating. And um, so when Yogeshwar said to try the concepts in your life, when you study something weekly, I think, and then you're studying outside, that way you can be prepared for the meetups. You, it changes you, and you don't even know that it's changing you until you see the growth over time. Like for me, it was a concept of, I have become more patient with myself and with other people. I have become more honest about my feelings about certain things and certain people. And I got open with friends to say, hey, I'm having a problem with this person. And I don't know like, I can't get to the root of it. And my friends have helped me get to the root of it. And so opening up about people, opening up on these meetups really did help. And so it's that way of testing these concepts in your daily life. That's how you know it's true. And I think you can apply that through all three texts. Is it true? Like, can you really use this in real life? Well, try it and see. That's the only way you're ever going to know. And so I love that part. And then Yogeshwar said, test it by using the three gunas, test it against the three gunas. Um, and I just thought that's something that I'm going to have to explore more for the next Gita meetup, you know? So then going to the next part, there's this concept of to continuous study. And it was the concept of, you learn something new every time you read the Gita. And you guess what I was talking about it, and he said every time you read the Gita, you will gain something new because you'll grow and your experience will grow. And you said the same thing, Shrikant, that as you grow, the Gita will say something different to you. And it's a constant study. And I think that's why I love these meetups more and more, is that it's continuous study, it's continuously learning. It's the concept of um, you're never going to get it. And if you think you know it, you're on the wrong path. And I think we said this last night too about the Bible, about the Gospel of John. It's like, when you think you know it, when you think you're an expert, when you think, you're a scholar, that's where you go wrong. And that's when you stop learning, because you think you know it all. There's nothing new to learn. So, it's like like every time you read the Gita, you're going to get something different for yourself. And that's okay. We as Westerners call it almost contradictory. Because something that you got the last time and something you to get something different this time, we see it as contradictory. But I don't see it like that at all. I just think, you have different experiences, and now the text, you feel the text differently than you did when you studied it before. Um, and then you guys were talking about experiment with concepts. Um, and then, once you experiment with those concepts, the concepts will change it. Change will just come upon you, So I like that part. And then Krishna, and then the last couple of places, I think you brought this up, Shrikant, in the video, is that you said Krishna is delighted when Arjun is asking questions. And that means because he's learning and he's growing, and he wants to learn and he's seeking. And Krishna never gets tired of the questions, right? You keep asking questions, you're learning and you're growing. And I feel the same way about, this group. And then my last point is, it was brought up that you continue to ask the questions until you see the truth. And that was the end of the Gita, where, where the reason why Arjun was so sure that he could go to war is that he asked all the questions. And even then, Krishna did not say go to war. He said, are you ready? It was the basic concept of, are you sure that you want to go to war? And Arjun is like, yes, because he asked the questions he needed to ask, and he continued to ask the questions until he got to the truth, until he saw the truth for himself. It wasn't something that Krishna could tell him. It's something that Arjuna had to see. So I think, like, what I leave it with is that, we're going to continue. I love the simple fact that we're going to continue studying these books, and just leaving everybody with the thing of continue to ask questions until you see the truth. That's the key. It's not till somebody thinks you should have the truth or you should get it by now. Ask the questions until you get it for yourself. So that's what I'm left with. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Avanik. So, folks, I would love to hear people's comments on this. So I'm going to make a few comments, and then I'm going to open it up for anybody else who wants to make any comments on what Avanik said. And then we'll go to the next person. People who have come in, like Rupali and Nalini, and anybody else, if you want to put a topic on the table, think of a topic that you would like to put on the table and just let me know. After we are done with this discussion of Avanik's point, I'm going to ask you folks if you want to add anything to put on the table for tonight. So I want to focus on 3 points here that Avanik said. The first point was that you have to be ready. Like, even, it's wonderful to be going back and forth between these works. In Bible, Jesus always asks you, what are you seeking? Do you want to leave me? Do you want, it's you have to ask. Unless you are ready, you won't get anything. So that is a very deep principle across the board here. Second is the dignity of seeking in the Indian tradition. It's all about, and you can see it in somebody like Yogeshwar. And you can see it in people like Naneshwar, or pretty much anybody in the Indian tradition who is deeply in the Indian tradition. There is a combination of humility and ambition at the same time. It's a very odd combination. You always think that there is, Brahma is infinite and you're trying to grasp it. At the same time, you know that there is at core of you, you are that. So you are like that. And you are continuously pursuing, continuously focusing on it, continuously trying to learn. And it's a never ending process. It's all about that process of learning. It's the activity of learning. It's the action of concentration on Brahma, on reality, on nature, which includes your nature. So that's seeking, the dignity of seeking. And you can see that, in Krishna's reaction to Arjun is that he's always delighted when Arjun is asking these questions. Even questions like, oh, you said this, but you also said that, it can't both be true. This doesn't make sense. Please explain. So he's always delighted because he's saying, Arjun really wants to know. And that's the most important thing. Not knowledge you have achieved, but wanting to know more. And the last part, which is actually related to this part, is that you have to see it for yourself. At one place, Krishna says, don't listen to me. Hear my words and then refer to the core of you and only what you see for yourself. Say that and act on that. So that is a very deep, these are deep ideas of Gita itself. And I'm delighted that Evanik started with the end of Gita. This is the culmination of Gita. These are the final verses of Gita that bring everything together. So thank you, Evanik. Anybody else has any comments on anything that Evanik said? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. And let's try to keep our comments concise so we can go through as much as we possibly can. We're going to start with Joe.
I appreciated this as well. I mean, the idea of how we know we're moving towards the center in a very practical sense. And I think Yogeshwar actually provided us with some very practical examples during this whole journey. And I think one of them is this continuous search for knowledge as to what is the right action to take under what circumstances. And that we need to be, I liked how you just put it, we need to be diligent, continuously diligent about how we're living our lives. And it's this kind of constant, striving and searching coupled with humility. And I think that was actually very powerfully put. But the epistemological aspect of it, the understanding of it that Evanik had talked about, I thought, how do we know? And I think that the Gita provides us with a number of different ways to know whether we're taking the right path in life, and how to find our center. And we've talked about this in the past, is that one of the most beautiful things I would say about the Gita is that there is multiple paths to the center. Knowledge is going to be a theme because that's kind of where I was going this evening as well. But Jnana Yoga, or about any of the yogas, and I think that that's for me one of the richness of it, and is essentially how many different examples and deep examples that are provided along the journey on how to get to understand your true nature. And it's not the same path for everyone. And so I think that I think that this is a really important passage, and I have to think about it some more. So thank you.
Wonderful. Does anybody else want to comment? You're welcome to type exclamation mark. You can comment on anything anybody has said at any point of time, so you're welcome to do that. So let us naturally, we'll go with Rupali. Rupali, go ahead. Give me just a second. I want to make sure everybody can unmute. Go ahead, Rupali.
Hi. There are two things that Evanik said that resonated with me. One was that you have to be ready, and in Montessori, in the school, often the teacher will say, "I'll give you a lesson when you're ready." So it's not it's not like a traditional classroom where a teacher comes in, and whether you're ready or not, the teacher's just going to tell you the lesson, and some children will get it, some won't. But Montessori, there is that readiness of the child. And when you're ready, you're receptive to hear, to listen, to understand, and to follow. And I think personally for myself too, like, although I had my mother-in-law or other people in the house who studied the Gita, it wasn't until I was ready that I could really understand it. So that was a great point that Evanik brought up. The other point she talked about was the change or the transformation that happens within a person. And, every week, I mean, I just look at from the beginning of when we started reading Gita to the end, there was a huge transformation within the group. And personally for myself, I feel, now when I approach a problem, I always say, have I looked at all four sides of this problem? Am I approaching it with knowledge and with action, or with the love? And, do I have all my four yogas working towards this problem? Or, am I just reacting to a situation? And that has helped me just to be at peace, whether the solution then is in my favor or not. But I think that feeling of detachment, and I always used to feel that the detachment is a passive way of living, but now I understand that it's not really passive. You're taking charge of the situation. So those were 2 points that Evanik mentioned that I thought that resonated with me. Thank you.
Wonderful. I would like to comment on a few things that you said, Rupali. So first one is that of readiness. And that you can see by the format of Gita itself. It's a conversation. So, and it's conversation between friends. So Krishna is trying to say something to Arjun, and Arjun is asking, and Krishna is speaking, and there is this back and forth. It is not one-way transmission. It is a back and forth. And whatever Krishna is saying is actually responsive to what Arjun is bringing up. So Krishna is giving Arjun ideas as he is ready. He's preparing the ground. And only when Arjun is ready for something, he will bring up the next point. And that can be done only through a conversation. So the conversation format is something which is very deep about this work itself. The second, I have also seen a transformation in myself and in others with this entire journey. It's been a parallel journey for me, Tao Te Ching, Bhagavad Gita, and Gospel of John. But in their own ways, each of them there is actually a lot of things that are common to these three works, which distinguish that commonality from what is there in modern times. And one of the aspects is the integration of everything in your life. So integration of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, your intuitions, all these four things coming together all the time. The way in which it is done in the Tao, the Bible, and the Bhagavad Gita is different, but it's all integrated, and it reminds us, as Rupali was saying, to be integrated, to look at everything in an integrated way. Modern time tends to be analytical. It tends to be linear. It tends to just double up on things that are working, things that you're used to, and looking at the figure and forgetting the ground, looking at just one aspect and not looking at all the other aspects that are tightly linked to it. So that is the other thing. So excellent points. Let's go with Evanik first and then Joe. Evanik.
Yeah, something Rupali said, and something you said too, Shrikant. When you started talking, Shrikant, you were talking about humility and ambition, and I love that because it is a combination of humility and ambition, and I think it goes right along with what Rupali was saying about looking at a problem through all facets of it, knowledge, action, and love, or to ask yourself, am I looking at it from all of those angles, or am I just reacting? And I think it goes to the concept of the end of Gita, where Arjuna is ready to take action, but he's ready to take good action because he's thought about it, he's asked the questions that he needs to ask, and he knows why he's doing it, because of the love that he has for Krishna and the love that he has for the Pandavas. And that's the reason why he's going to this. And he didn't have that in the beginning. And I think of the end of the Gita is like knowledge and action together. That concept comes together, and that's why Arjuna is ready. That's what I had.
Thank you. Thank you. So now we will go with Joe, and after his comment, we will go into the verse that he wants to highlight. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly about the idea of being ready is something that is very important, in the sense that I remember I was actually driving out with a philosophy professor to in the mountains, not too long ago. And I said, I wish I'd taken philosophy earlier. I wish I'd been exposed to these works earlier. I wish I'd known all these things. And he said, well, you may not have been ready. It's just, it comes to you when it should. And sometimes you have to go through the experiences that you've had in order to come to the conclusions that what is really important and how to live your life. So I think that's really critical, and it does lead to a transformation, which is, leading to Evanik's second point. And the transformation did occur while we were here. I've talked about this in the past because, going through this text helped me discover my spirituality again. And so I think that there was a transformation both personally, but it was the right time too. And that's an important thing, is to understand, is that things happen when they're supposed to, not when we want them to.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Joe. Joe, if you could now go to the point that you wanted to bring up. Now, Rupali or Nalini, you came in late. Rupali, would you like to put any point on the table?
In a bit.
Okay.
I've just
Whenever
got
you're
back
ready,
home.
whenever you're ready. Now, not right now, but just think of something that you would like to put on the table and let me know. The same thing with Nalini. All right, let's go with Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, this is from the Sri Aurobindo version. But what is this in us that drives a man to sin, as if by force, even against his own struggling will? O Varishana, if I'm saying that correctly, I hope. I found that this passage and just thinking about it, is that why do we do things that actually are against our own personal self-interest sometimes? And this is where the constant quest for knowledge is actually critical, and karma yoga is something that, or dana yoga, I should say, is something that we, is one path to the center. Sometimes we have to have a deeper understanding of why we did the things we do. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of trial and error. And sometimes we still make the same mistakes over and over. I know I have, in the sense that many times I find myself where I allow myself to slip and get away from my center, so to speak. And I don't necessarily appreciate the things that are around me. I don't necessarily see the value in everything that I'm doing. And why do I do it? And it takes a deeper understanding of yourself. So why do we sin? Even though we know better, even though it's against our own interests. And so this is kind of the depth of knowledge that you're looking for self in this process. You're searching for your ego, in that you discover your ego in that process. And what you can do is you can then set up a set of, all right, it sounds bad, but parameters that help you, mitigate, protect you against yourself. And so for me, that's something that, it's a daily exercise. It's something that can never stop as well. And it comes back to the constant striving and knowledge that we talked about that is deep in Indian culture. So, yeah, I mean, it's a profound question that's being asked. Why do we why do we act against our own self-interests? And I still don't have the answers. Even last week, I was kind of trying to figure out.
Thank you, Joe. Let's look at the profound answer here. So 36 is, Arjun said, but if there is no fault in following our nature, what is this in us that drives a man to sin, as if by force, even against his own struggling will? Krishna said, this is desire and its companion wrath, children of Rajas, all devouring, all polluting. Know thou this as the soul's great enemy, which has to be slain. As a fire is covered over by smoke, as a mirror by dust, as an embryo is wrapped by the amnion, so this knowledge is enveloped by it. Enveloped is knowledge, O Arjun, by this eternal enemy of knowledge, in the form of desire, which is insatiable fire. The senses, mind, and intellect are its seat. Enveloping knowledge by these, it bewilders the embodied soul. Therefore, controlling first the senses, do you slay this thing of sin, destructive of knowledge, in order to live in a calm, clear, luminous truth of the spirit. Supreme, they say, beyond their objects are the senses. Supreme over the senses is the mind. Supreme over the mind, the intelligent will. That which is supreme over the intelligent will is he, the Purusha, the witness. Thus, awakening by the understanding of to the highest, which is beyond even the discerning mind, putting force on the self by the self to make it firm and still, slay you, this enemy, in the form of desire, who is so hard to assail. So what Krishna is saying is that it is the attachments. It is your attachment to the periphery that is causing this. So you have the attachment at the periphery, which is sensory attachment. The next level is the mind of trying to figure out what is going on. And that too has its attachments of its own. And then at the center is what is Purusha. Purusha is your capacity of being conscious, being alive, being present to the reality of your own being. And that is covered up by this suit, by the dust of these attachments. So you lose sight of it. So the solution is to go back to the center, which is awareness, which is consciousness, which is your ability to direct your attention, and then directing the attention to the center, away from the periphery. So that's the answer that Krishna gives. All right. Would love to hear anybody, any thoughts from anybody. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Joe, what do you think?
I mean, thank you, because I think that brought clarity to what I was trying to say, very much so. So I think that it is true. It is about detachment from, and every time that I've analyzed it, you have to go, you have your senses, sensory experience, you have your mind, and then there's something deeper. And that's really where you start to find yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes a long time to get there. And that's where what we were just talking about makes a lot of sense with, are you ready? And because you really have to face yourself. And many times, actually, I have to believe that Jung kind of saw this as well. You have to go very deep and understand the in the filth that will be found. And so I think that this is really a very powerful and deep concept, because it goes far beyond of, think of it in very simple terms. I'm hungry, I'm going to eat something that I shouldn't. It's far beyond that, because you shouldn't, you can stop yourself. That's just a sensory experience. There's something deeper. What is in your mind? What is really, why do you hunger for something? And what is really behind the desires? What are what's deeper there? And once we discover that, life becomes a lot easier. And we start to appreciate the things that we really ought to be appreciating, or that are more fulfilling, I should say.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to go back to this. So the question was, what is this in us that drives a man to sin, as if by force, even against his own struggling will? So what is it? What is this in us that drives you to sin? What is sin? Sin is simply missing the mark. It is simply being attached to the periphery. It is simply paying attention to the periphery instead of the center. See, this is exactly the same point that we were discussing yesterday in the Gospel of John. It's the same point. And the solution is actually instantaneous. It's not even a process, both according to the Gospel of John and according to Bhagavad Gita. It is the willingness to sacrifice. It is the willingness to take on everything that is in the periphery, all your attachments to the periphery. And if you decide to do that, not over time, but now, at this point of time, at any point of time, you can be conscious. The Purusha is untouched by that. That is the idea of Christ. That is the idea of saying that is the idea of cross. It is the idea of eternal life. It is the idea of saying no to things which are not with God, so that you can be with God. And it's an instant, and that is available to everybody at all points of time. And that is the lesson of the New Testament. And that is the lesson of Bhagavad Gita at the same time. Evanik.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and thank you, Shrikant. Joe asked the question in the beginning, why do we do the things that are against our best interest? And I think, you answered that so well, Shrikant, when you said it's the attachments and it's our desires. And I think it's the attachment to the desires itself. I think also too, when you're attached to desires, they never get fulfilled, right? Even if you think you got it, then you're going to want more. It's just like this never ending cycle. You're going to want more. You're going to want more. It's always that it's never good enough, right? But when you're focused on the center and away from the ego, and you're going towards the center of who you are, it is still, never enough, but it's never enough in a different way. It's never enough in the sense that you're always constantly learning and growing. So on one hand, you can have this unlimited thirst for knowledge of the center, or you could be chasing after this thing that is sometimes so out of your control. And your desires are really, for the most part, out of your control, whether it's your desire for someone and that person may not want you. That's something you can't control. It's outside of your control. You may have a desire for lots of money, but your luck may run dry, and your bank may go belly up and you lose a lot of money. You may lose a lot of money in investments. All of those things are outside of your dichotomy to control, and that's what makes them not worthy of, I don't want to say it doesn't, I don't want to say it doesn't make it worthy to work for, but if you're focused on it and your attention is there, there's so many factors outside of your control. You can only take the action that you can take, and it'll be what it'll be. And the center, what that does is it helps you deal with those desires that you don't get. When you're focused on the center, it's like, okay, well, those were just the fruits. Like, I did my best, I took the action, and it didn't work out. Okay, you can deal with that better if you're focused on the center. So I think that was a really great question that Joe brought up. And I'm so glad that he did. And, I think one thing, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about really quickly, is when we're talking about eternal life. And I think eternal life, we talked about it in the Bible, it's the eternal life mindset. And when you're focused on the center and you're focused on what's good and you're focused on what is in your control, which is what you say, what you do, and how you act. If you're focused on the center, you're focused on the type of person you want to be, and you're constantly working towards that, you will be fulfilled, even when you miss the mark, even when you sin. I love the definition of sin being you miss the mark. It doesn't have eternal consequences as much as we think of sin in the Bible as you sin, you're going to hell. If you sin and you don't repent, you're going to hell. Whereas if you look at sin, the way Gita looks at sin is you missed the mark. That means you can always hit the mark again. Like, there's this concept of redemption. There's a concept of, okay, you messed up, and you can still make it right. You can still be who you are and admit it. So that's what I had. I just thought that was, but I think ultimately that's just a great question.
Great. I want to make a couple of comments, and then I will we'll go to Joe. So I want to make 2 points. One, it's the concept of sin. The way in which it is there in Gita, it is cyclical. What happens is that if you do bad things, you actually go away from the center. And if you do good things, you start moving towards the center. So it becomes easier if you go towards the center, and it becomes harder if you go away from the center. So there is a consequence of it. But at any point of time, you can choose to go towards the center. So I want to clarify what I said. I mean, I'm saying that, no, this is as best as I understand it. This is a very deep topic. Okay. You have the choice at any point of time to do the right thing and to focus on the center, to be with God, to pay attention to reality, to pay attention to what is around you and what is in you. You always have that choice. And both Gita and the New Testament, that is a core idea there. It is an idea of tremendous power that is there within us. The second point, I want to make it clear that this is a verb. As Bucky says, this is a verb. God is a verb. This is an action. So this is not one and done. It's not about just saying something. It is about doing that all the time. And if you do not take the effort of keeping focus on the center, you will drift. You can drift, which is the tamas direction. You drift away from the center, or you could be going round and round chasing something, slowly going away from the center, which is the rajas direction. So there is 3 directions possible. There is the circle, there is the periphery, there is the center. Sattvic direction is the direction towards the center, and it is effort-based, and you have to keep doing that all the time. If you don't do that, then you can be going round, which is you're attached to things that you're attached to, or you can be lazy, evading, and drift away, choose to look away and go towards the periphery. That is the tamas direction. And all these are open to you at any point of time. And it requires continuous vigilance, continuous attention, in order to keep focused on the center. So I wanted to make it clear that it's not one time, but it is all the time. It's an issue. And in some ways you can say, people will react to it by saying, oh, that's a lot of work. Yes, it's a lot of work. On the other hand, it is very liberating. That means no matter where you are, you can always move towards the center. So, but it also places the responsibility on you. So that's what I would say. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
I just want to highlight something that's I think is the value of a conversation. Again, I know this is previous.
Sure, go ahead.
Point. I think it's very important, because what we're doing here tonight, and what we've had the pleasure of having Yogeshwar here, it's allowed us to engage with the text like Krishna and Arjuna. In a sense, we're having a conversation and we're continually learning. And there are some, very deep concepts that are being communicated in a lot of different ways. And, again, how our sensory experiences, how our mind works, and how something deeper, what propels us to do the things that we do. I think that's part of the beauty of the Gita, is that it is a conversation, and Arjuna's asking the same questions that we are. So I think that's.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So now we will go to Jyoti, then Paul, and then Rupali. Jyoti, what would you like to put on the table?
Hello all. I'm going to talk about the chapter 6. I think Nalini and I had a little discussion last time because we both lost our husbands. And Nalini she had little doubt about what happened, where did it go? So when I was listening to Yogeshwar, it kind of brought back that discussion that we had. So I'm going to start with that. In the beginning, Arjuna asks Krishna a question. He asked Krishna, if I get deviated from the yoga in the middle, will I ever get to start all over again? Or do I have to start all over again? Will I get back to it? I know, Krishna, you know the path of yoga. Please remove my doubt. So that was the big doubt in his mind. Okay, I get started, but somewhere along the middle, I get distracted or I get deviated. Then what happens? So Krishna, he gives him the example of karma yoga, and he says to him, if you do the right karma, that becomes your swabhav or nature, and that stays with you. It never goes away, even if you get deviated in the middle. And Yogeshwar went ahead and gave some very concrete examples that I really liked. He said, if you eat some food and you like it, but then you don't eat it for a while, let's say if you come back to it in 10 years, you will still like it because you liked it that time, but in between there was an interruption. Similarly, he said, if there are clouds out there and the big thrash of wind comes and disperses all those clouds, so what happens? Do the clouds ever come back? Yes, when the wind dies down, the clouds will come back. So they were very good metaphors to understand that how temporary situation does return. Similarly, Nalini and my husband, even though there has been a big interruption, they will start where they ended. And that's cyclic. The Yogeshwar said, life is a cycle. It doesn't move in linear fashion. So that was a good point that I thought, he made, at least for my understanding. So then Krishna explains to Arjuna, who is yogi? Yogi is the one who is not only enchanted by scriptures, but has experienced the knowledge of scriptures and Brahma. So he said that when you have walked a yogic path and you are in your life, you have a rebirth, it is not a mere coincidence that you are born to the parents who have a chromosomal or DNA or genetics structure that is geared for spirituality. But the child who does not understand, who does not remember everything in the past, but when he encounters spirituality from the parent, he recognizes it because he has experienced that before. And in life, it happens when you come across something that you were attached to in a good way, and then you encounter it again, it comes right back to you. And you have another attachment, and you can figure out why you are so attracted to that particular situation or condition, that's because you had the propensity in you. You had experienced it somewhere, and it becomes fresh. It becomes fresh in you. And so that was another example that Krishna gave. That made sense to me. So karma, when you treat other people right, then your karma, you integrate that with Brahma, and you become one with Brahma. He gave an example of drop of water, which is a yogic mind, which joins the ocean, which is Brahma. It becomes one. And then he talks about how you begin your separate identity. Your identity is your mind, your body, or your ego. And when that is your identity, you had difficulty with Brahma, with integrating with Brahma. In order to integrate with Brahma, to become one with Brahma, you have to choose a path of righteousness so that you can then move in or go along with another source, which is a Brahma. Then he talks about, and he says this comes with practice. And there comes then also your core being. When your core being identifies with the core being of others, then you also merge with Brahma. And then comes the concept of what Shrikant tells us about Namaste, that the God in me is greeting the God in you. So these are all the paths that a yogi can take and be with God or be with Brahma. So I'm going to request Shrikant now. You had spoken about Naneshwari's explanation about Nar and Narayana. And I would be thrilled if you would go over that again. I really like that. I can speak about it, but I would like you to speak about it.
Sure. Thank you, Jyoti. So let me talk about Nar and Narayan. So Nar and Narayan is an avatar of Vishnu. Just like Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu, Nar Narayan is another avatar of Vishnu. Rama is another avatar. Now, Nar and Narayan actually is considered to be equivalent of Krishna and Arjuna. They were, Nar and Narayan, it is held that they are reincarnated as Krishna and Arjuna. And you can understand the relationship between God and man by looking at this Nar Narayan. Because Nar Narayan is God. That is Vishnu. Okay. But so let's look at Nar Narayan. So Nar and Narayan were twins. They were twins. Nar means man. Narayan means God. So it is twins where they're brothers. And they have one soul between them. So the way they operate is at any point of time, one of them is meditating and the other one is doing things. And then it switches. And the one is the first one starts meditating and the second one starts acting. And there is a very famous story where he was fighting a particular demon which had like 1,000 lives, and he kept on killing, this Nar Narayan, this, I think it is Hiranyakashipu, but I'm not sure. So, everybody came, to Nar Narayan saying that this Hiranyakashipu was so many lives, is destroying everything and he's going to take over the world. So save us. And they start fighting. And Hiranyakashipu looks at him and looks at them and said, "What are you doing? You know, I have this special shield in me, you know, or armor that has all these layers, and this is like thousand layers. And what they would do is that one of them would be fighting, whereas the other one would be meditating. After he has pierced some of this, the nerve would fall dead. But then Narayan, who had been meditating, would transfer the soul to him, and he would be resurrected, and the other one would start fighting, and this one would go and start meditating. So they kept doing that until they won over Hiranyakashipu. But the main point here is this profound idea of oneness. There is a conversation. So if you look at Krishna and Arjun, you see, it is, firstly, they are best friends. The way in which Krishna describes Arjun is that if I take all, they are brother-in-laws. Okay, they are cousins and they are brother-in-laws. They are best friends. The way in which Krishna describes Arjun is that if I take all my relatives and put them on one side of a scale, and Arjun on the other side, Arjun is going to be heavier. He means more to me than everybody else put together, all my relatives put together. The way they deal with each other as friends, I mean, there are times where, at somewhere towards the end of Gita, Arjun says, "Look, I'm so sorry. You are God, but I have treated you as just like me. And, I'm sure I have insulted you as a result of it, because your knowledge is so much more than mine." And Krishna says, "No, he says, "Look, don't, that's not something that bothered me at all. I'm really honored." There is a point where, like, Naneshwar says that, this is Naneshwar's interpretation, is that there are points where Krishna, Arjun starts to understand stuff. And he says, oh, so Krishna is now suddenly afraid. He says, now that Arjun is knowing the center, he will become the center, he will become me. And then I will lose a friend. So he's very concerned and is afraid that, okay, now what is going to happen here? But you see, there is this profound love and respect. The way in which Krishna speaks to Arjun is as an equal. And what he's saying through his action is that there is God in Arjun. It's the same principle as the foot washing. When Jesus is washing his disciples' feet, he's saying that the way I love my Father, I'm loving you, and you can love others. So what is being transmitted here, what is being said here is that there is that divineness in you. And in some ways, Krishna and Arjun are just ways of abstracting, seeing the play between the materiality and the spirituality, both of which are always together. It is the idea of Shiva Shakti that we talked about, of spirit and matter, the oneness of that. And it is demonstrated really beautifully in the story of Nar Narayan. Jyoti, is that satisfactory?
Yes, it is. I like the story a lot.
Thank you. Anybody else wants to make any comments? You're welcome to do that. And you can make these comments at any point of time. You can make them now, later on. Now, what I did was that I made a mistake. I asked Paul to ask a particular question that he had asked yesterday, but he doesn't have to keep to that. Paul can bring up anything that he wants to bring up. So Paul, the floor is yours. And then it'll be Rupali. If anybody else wants to put anything on the table, they're welcome to do that too. Paul.
Well, we won't be way far off, Srikant. Thank you for the open field. But yes, Tvam Asi, you can, what I'm about to say, you can bring that in because I really am, I think, on that subject. But what I want to, how I want to get to it is, because we're talking about our personal experience with these things. And Joe mentioned how this set of meetings brought him back to some form of his own spirituality. But, and this is true for myself as well, in that, and I want to, by way of complimenting this group, describe other ways. It's not just being ready, I think, Evanik. It's how was it presented to you when you saw these teachings in the past? And I propose that you could present the teachings of the Gita and Hinduism as this really great system that makes you really healthy and make you really happy. And it's like a psychology system and a physical system. And or you could present it like I took a course in the Gita from, I'm not demeaning them, and I think maybe Yogeshwar is part of them, but from the, the what's the Hare Krishna Association?
ISKCON, and Yogeshwar has nothing to do with that, yeah.
Okay, but they were deep, reverent about it. And I went through the whole thing. But if you feel like you're being sort of pushed in a direction, that might be another reason you can't hear it. So my point is the beauty of Srikant's group and the way he studies three things, more things, is you never feel pushed and you're seekers, you're true seekers. So that has helped me, and I think maybe helped us all read texts that we might have read before, even twice. But now we're reading it with this open, more open mind. But there's sort of an elephant in the room in all of these teachings that has to do with the difference between the modern Western view and the atheist view. And I was looking, Srikant, for ways of putting it while we were, the best ones I found, I'll just name a couple. This is Aurobindo, and this is chapter 2, but it's actually when I think when Krishna's trying to convince Arjuna to fight and things, and he's talking about the immortal soul, and he's saying things like, it is not true that at any time I was not, nor thou, nor these kings of men, nor is it true that any of us shall ever cease to be as the soul passes, so that's just the changing of the body. But the point I'm trying to make by a quote like that is this in its way, and the Gospel of John in its way. Let's not talk about Tao for a second. Equate something in each of us with an eternal principle, a transcendent eternal principle. And it's not like, oh, we just kind of know it's out there. Sort of we are it. And that distinguishes something. That's what I mean by when I say the elephant in the room. There's no Western like scientific thing that says that I know of. And when you discover that, it's radical. And I say it was radical thousands of years ago, because those guys walking around without any science, they had no reason to think there was an eternal, immutable, absolute principle in them and in everybody else. And they were saying that. It's like amazing, absolutely amazing. So that's the unique amazingness that the Gita brings to me. More than, it's truly amazing that they have a system for discovering that. That's amazing too. But the secular humanists of the world have extracted that from the other principle and said, hey, you'll just get lower blood pressure, which bothers the heck out of me. And so I think I can stop there because I want to hear Srikant and others talk about the impact of that principle that we have the transcendent, realizable, ultimate infinity in our finite selves. That radical concept. That's just what I wanted to put on the table. I hope it's similar to what you were saying, Shrikant. Okay.
Okay. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And I agree with pretty much everything that you've said. All the kind of core points. So one point is that actually the way in which many of these religions are presented is not religion. It's like they're presenting just the forms of religion in order to get people to do certain things, which is not religion at all. If you go and actually read Bhagavad Gita or Tao Te Ching or Gospel of John, it's not like that. So in some ways, all we are doing is going back to the text and trying to commune with the text. Secondly, what we are doing is, as you correctly pointed out, that we are looking at all these three things and really trying to say all of them actually invite you to be seekers of trying to understand the universal principles operating in nature and in you. And that, in the short form, let me just call it the Tao. Okay, there is a beautiful book by C.S. Lewis called The Abolition of Man, where he makes exactly the same point that you did, but really in a very convincing way through a whole book. It's a short book, maybe 50 pages, maybe 70 pages, something like that. But it's the most brilliant capturing of the loss of the Tao in modern times. The Tao, actually, it was not about science either, because Newton had the Tao, Darwin had the Tao, Einstein had the Tao. Because what it is saying is that there is a universal principle that you're trying to get at, and you're trying to understand the universal principle. The modern time says there is no universal principle, and there are only 10,000 things. So it is exactly opposite of these all traditions. And so that is absolutely a very deep point, and it is the elephant in the room, or more precisely, it is elephant that is in the room everywhere and you can't see it. It is like it is everywhere. So it's the universal principle that is behind all the manifestations and all the potential manifestations. And all these three disciplines, whether you call it God the Father, the Tao, or Brahma, are, in my understanding, I don't understand them very well, but to me, they are all equivalent. And it is the same as the nature, that concept of nature that Newton talks about, that Jefferson talks about. So those are there throughout. It is the deist kind of view in the, during the Enlightenment, where it is all about trying to discover the universal principles. And these universal principles are there not only in the physical world, but in consciousness, but in social structures, in man, inside and outside. And that is exactly what these, all these works are about. So, we don't even have to go to Tvam Asi, because this point that you're making is a very big point. And I would love to hear what people have to say about that, because that's really what distinguishes these traditions. It also gives them the character that they have, that they are all integrated. They are integrated because they are driven by universal principles. It's the principles it's the Tao, which is making the Wu Wei effective. It is making water flow like it flows. It flows in a very complex way, but there is Tao behind it that gives it. And you can see the Tao in the way in which trees grow. And you can see it in the way in which there is good human interaction And what happens when everybody is focused on their own 10,000 things or 1,000 things, and their other person's 1,000 things are different, and all they can talk about are these things the same? Oh no, they are not the same. And then there is the otherness that comes from it. So it's a very deep point. So I want to let people comment on that. And then what we'll do is that, so go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you'd like to comment on that. Jyoti, would you like to comment on this one, or would you like to comment on something earlier? Either is fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to make a comment on what I said about the long interruption when you are doing yoga. And see, Gita kind of removes the feelings of guilt, that if you have not attended to bhakti for some time, and you go back, you can go back, and that removes the feeling of guilt, that, oh my God, now that I've been so away from it, how am I going to go back to it? So that verse was very soul touching. It was very satisfying. And so overall, about the feeling of getting one with Brahma, by good deeds, and staying in the core, in your center, and not getting drawn and pulled out to periphery. And that's not a religious thing, and that's a virtuous thing. And Gita touches that. And that is also another source of satisfaction for me from Gita. And lastly, what I was going to say was, why all of us who are here, why are we so enchanted with Gita? It's because we have all experienced, or we are experiencing the spiritual principles of life. And when we hear this coming from Gita, we feel very connected to it. We feel very attached to it. It reminds us for something which is untainted in primitive times, and it has been left as it is. That's about it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is going to be Penny first. Penny.
Oh, okay. Well, I think that's a huge point that you raised, Paul, and it's one of the things that I looked at when I was first reading the Gita, and like about the Atman and stuff like that. The idea that there's a piece of divinity, a piece of the whole universal in each individual, and I did not get that conveyed to me when I did my Christian upbringing, so it was really an amazing concept, because I had a deep feeling that there was spirituality that existed, but not in the form that it had been presented in the church. And I just I've been going to like yoga classes lately. Well, I love yoga anyway, but just the last yoga class, the teacher at the end said, she was thanked us for letting her lead us through the spiritual, through the yoga session. And then she says, the light in me sees the light in you. And it was like, wow, that is so profound, because that's what she's talking about. She's talking about, her Atman seeing it, being a part of the universal. And it was, I just really was amazed at, really how profound that sentence was. And I thought, gee, before I studied the Gita, I wouldn't have really thought too much about that. But now it's really, really something very profound that she was saying in such simple words.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Penny. Amazing. Next up is Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Well, you saw I still, now you got me curious. I kind of hear you talk about Tvam Asi.
Sure.
But on Penny's point, related to something you said the other night, Srikant, I've become a little bit cynical, Penny, about that. even though I love it, I remember Srikant the other night saying, so when you say Om, you're saying God. Wait, are you really? Meaning, was that woman who said that truly grasping that she has the infinite principle inside her and it's reaching to the other person? Or is she just kind of mouthing a pleasantry, which also feels good? But I wonder if that's been the case all the way back since these were first taught. We think of these early people as so spiritual and it was everywhere in the temples and the university. But I have a feeling they also kind of, a lot of the people for thousands of years ended up just kind of being taught something in their schools or temples, or and then they just would say it. I don't mean to trivialize what you're saying because it is so beautiful. But I want to now my standards are, I want to see a seeker really try to say it as if they mean it and understand the radicalness of what they're saying. That's asking a lot in a yoga class. But anyway, thank you, Penny. Thanks, everyone. And then Tvam Asi, yeah.
All right, so let me try to do this. This is going to be very, very tough. So I don't think I'm really, I don't understand this. So I'm still going to try. So this is about words. Okay, words are living things. Words are living things, and most people just use corpses. Okay, they really don't know words. So it's like we're talking about, people who use religious forms in order to control other people. That's one level of it. But there is much more, like almost everyone, including myself, we end up using words without fully getting the living meaning of it. Very few people do. But there are people who do. So for example, if you want, you will have to read Naneshwar in original, okay? The thing is, even the translation, I want to give you this example of Tvam Asi. Like you can't really get, we were going through the Gospel of John and I was talking about the word with. It actually means complete, the richness of that, what is there in that word with, is there in the original language. John certainly knew it and was able to speak so beautifully about it because he was the one who was with Jesus in every possible way, spiritually, in his thoughts, in his emotions, in his actions. He never left his side. So he knows what with is, and he is writing that with, or actually it is prose. So you need to find, there are people of that caliber. Naneshwar is one of them, in my judgment, and you will have to find people. The fact that there are 1 million people who use those words as weapons against each other, who use words in a dead way in order to stop themselves from thinking about others, all those are some things that are very easy to do because it is simply in the verse that Joe read, it's all about just attachment to words. So it is in the periphery. You think that you're saying Om, and you're actually not. It's actually a thing that is stopping you from getting to Brahma because you think you've gotten to Brahma, which you have not. But you make yourself think that you have something. So a lot of the way in which people use words are like that. But that doesn't change the power of the word. And each of us has to discover it. You can't say, oh, this person is not discovered it, so I'm free. It's like, I don't need to even look at it. You have to discover it. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And so I want to give you the example here. Like Tvam Asi. Tad is God. Tvam is you. And Asi is is, so you are God. That's the translation. But it's a terrible translation. And you will use the same, your concept of God, your concept of you, and your concept of is. It seems very simple. These just 3 words. And I'm telling you that each of these 3 words has a whole tradition, whole context of thinking about it. So if you really want to understand it, spend time with people who understand it and how they say it. And if you understand the context, and if that context lives in you as you think of this and as you say it, then you have something. Otherwise, you simply can say, oh, I know Gita, which you don't. Or you understand something, which you don't. And that's what most of us do, including myself. So you have to be always vigilant to get at the meaning, okay? So let me just show you just these 3 words, okay? Again, my understanding of Sanskrit is very limited. So first one is tad. Tad actually means that, okay? So why is God being referred to as that? It's the same principle of the Tao, that you can't speak of it. It is the entire corpus is saying you can't really speak of it. You can simply say that. Okay, it is the same idea of the Tao, that Tao ko Tao, Fei Chang Tao. Okay, it's saying Tao that can be spoken of is not the eternal Tao. It's the same principle by calling it that. So you're not even using that word. Now, if you translate it as God, you're putting all kinds of other stuff with it. Okay. Now, Tvam is you. Okay. But it is you in the core nature of your real self is what it is trying to point to, not you. Whenever you think of you, you say, okay, this is my body, this is who I am, this is my profession, this is my family. That's not Tvam. That's not the Tvam that is being talked about. But see how naturally you take a word that is translated, and this is not just true of translation. You really have to, like, you really have to get the context in which a word was said. Like a very beautiful, formulation that Walter Ong had is that all text is pretext. And I would add to that, all text is pretext because it misses the context. So unless you bring the context in, and words are simply your way of relating to the context and reliving the context, you don't have the word. So you can see that Tad is not really God. Tvam is not really you. Okay. Now let's come to is. You say, what can you say about is? Okay. Asi is based, its root is asmi, which means to breathe. So if you want to really translate it, it's like I breathe God, I breathe that, or it is showing this profound action that is going on in you as being the same as the action that is going on in the Tao. Now, all of this presumes the same kind of attitude towards the Tao, that humility towards the Tao. Because if you say, I am God, like if you say, I am Tao, you're finished. Because you are no longer, like you are replacing a name, the Tao, for the real Tao. You have just one of 10,000 things, and that is going to stop you from reaching the Tao. So the moment you say, I am Tao, you are definitely not the Tao. Okay, because that's what it means. When you say, you know, Tao ke Tao, Fei Chang Tao, that's what it means. And it's the same principle here. So it is in a continuous action. It is saying you have to breathe it. And you can breathe it. So the context in which it is expressed is that this is a realization when you have that you have to reach, that you have to climb to, that you have this experience in that glorious moment of that kind of enlightenment of seeing that as such, so that your breathing is that, and you will get it only for a short period of time. You can get it. It's open to you all the time. But it's not just that you said something. You actually have to live that. And very few of us can and do. And the surest way of not doing it is to say, I'm God. Because then you're pretending to something that firstly, you don't know what it is. God, thou, you don't know. Secondly, you don't even know you. And you don't even know what is. And so you can see how profoundly away, profoundly you have missed your mark. You're completely in the periphery in every way, while thinking that you have just said something about the center. Well, what could be worse? It is mistaking periphery for the center. So that's how I would put it. So any comments? Let's go to Joe next. Joe.
Okay, so I'm like trying to stay in the conversation, because I think that that was beautiful, actually. I mean, something that you said that I think that we can come back to is turning away from God. I think is something that people have a tendency to put all their faith in, as we've said here many times, in the parts and not the whole. And we've said that with Bucky Fuller. And so I think sometimes that we start to say what is, and somehow from there we jump to what ought to be. And these texts provide us with what ought to be through their universal teachings. And you can see the teachings in all three of these texts, and there's ancient wisdom in all of these. And even in the Tao, and there's in a lot of ancient texts, I'll just say that. But what it's really kind of saying is that there's some kind of order to the world, something deeper than ourselves. And I think that that's an important thing to recognize, because and I'm really coming back to what Paul originally said, is this idea that all these texts are teaching us some universal truths that we can keep coming back to. And I don't think that the modern world actually appreciates that. In many ways, they get away from that. And that's where, the Gita has personally been good for me. But somehow I think that many times I think that we're kind of just, when we retreat into some degree of like kind of relativism, that it ends up being extremely harmful to us, both personally and on a deeper level. And I think, it is a constant striving, and this is a constant search for knowledge, and this is not something that's kind of static. It's just that there is universal truths, I believe, in these texts that allow us to live our lives a little bit more intentionally. So it's kind of, I was kind of trying to address what Paul put on the table initially, more than anything else. Is there, you know, is there any kind of moral order to the universe? And I think that that's kind of what he was getting at, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you, Joe. So you made several points. I want to address some of them. I mean, there is a profound difference. When firstly, there is a profound difference between the entire worldview of these texts together, considered as one unit, and the modern world. The modern world simply holds that there are only 10,000 things, to put it in the words of Tao, only 10,000 things. And the moment you say that, and that there is no Tao, moment you say that, you have problems like, okay, what is, what is ought? Whose 10,000 things should rule? It brings in relativism, all kinds of issues. But when you situate yourself in these texts, you can see how many of the problems that modern philosophy and modern man thinks of just evaporate. Consider the is and ought. People think, oh, there is this big gap between is and ought. And how can you fill that? Because the is 10,000 things. With 10,000 things, there is no ought. There is only temporary ought in temporary conditions, which will keep changing. But look at the is that is being pointed to here, and look at how it just leads to the ought. You know, you're saying that the Tao is. That means that that is the universal principle guiding everything. And you just have to let it flow through you. That is the ought. The Wu Wei is the ought of the Tao. Similarly, Brahma and Atma is what is. And that the Atma and Brahma are one. So being focused on Brahma, being focused on Atma, being focused on the center is what ought to be, because it is the center. It is, so is and ought are connected at the hip. The word is at once, as we saw yesterday. It is with the Tao. And by being with the Tao, it carries the laws of nature, laws of what is, as part of it, is conscious of it, and is used to create everything. So it is, at the same time, it is the principles of Tao acting through consciousness, through explicit ideas, creating the world according to God, or creating a good world or goodness of action. So you see the connection between these, and all of it being fueled by the concept of with or concept of love. It's just one thing. And you can see it in the person of Jesus himself. So all of these solve the problems of something like is ought, because it's just two sides of the same thing. And the is fundamentally not a thing. See, the other thing is that modern world is always thinking in terms of nouns. They're thinking in terms of things. It's saying that there is only 10,000 things. Tao is an action. It is a verb. Brahma is an action, the with is an action. Spirit is an action. And it's action that is underlying everything. It is the way in which nature moves. And then the art simply is that if that's how everything moves, then move with it. That's it. So thank you. Next up is Paul. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, this latest spin on things, take on it from Joe and you makes me wonder about, we talked the other night about the co-opting of the mandate of heaven. Srikant, maybe that was in the Art of War meetup, but it makes me consider a possibility that, because where the moral relativism comes into problems and the religion gets in trouble through history is these moral mandates that are listed as part of the mandate from heaven. But maybe it's the 10 Commandments in Christianity. It's there's a set of mandates in most of the, Confucianism has them, probably the way of getting to Brahman is a set of ways of living in Bhagavad Gita, but maybe those are sort of, you're making me think for the first time about the idea of a way of thinking about this, that those are like trappings, because what we really need to do is focus on the center, the universal principle, which by the way, can't be written out as 10,000 moral dictates, as we just said. So you just keep seeking for that. And moral behavior, it doesn't need to be inscribed on a set of tablets or anywhere else. It will naturally result. And all these other methods of defining moral behavior are sometimes given by culture, by the want to control, by large organizations, and I'm being a bit of a cynic, and I hadn't really thought about this way. So I'll just put that out there and stop there. Because I think it's beautiful just to think of all you really need is to strive for the center, and morals will take care of themselves, because that's going to naturally lead to an ought. That's what I got from what you said, which is beautiful.
Thank you, Paul. So the Tao would agree with you, and Gita and Bible would strongly disagree with you. And I'm more in the camp of Gita and Tao, or Gita and the Bible, as it sits on the top of the Tao. Tao is the fundamental. So Tao is all about respecting what is and never losing sight of that, which is actually foundation of both Gita and the Bible, the New Testament. But Tao kind of, Tao is the foundation of all these three, and it does it beautifully. I truly love the Tao. But Gita and Bible do something which is more than the Tao. And they show you what word can and ought to be, and what it does. And they actually make civilization possible. The way Tao does that is to seed it to Confucianism. So Chinese is not just Taoism. Like Bhagavad Gita is a foundation of Indian culture. The Christianity can be a foundation of the Western culture. Taoism is just about nature. It doesn't really build out the other part. And that's where it creates room for Confucianism, which is far more controlling, etc. What the greatness of Bhagavad Gita and the Bible is that it shows you how to do words in accordance with Tao. Now, yes, all the dangers of the words that Tao talks about are real. And most people will take the 10,000 words, just like they will take the 10,000 things and forget the Tao. Okay, so they will take the word and they will take the, word In him was life, and life was the light of men. Okay. And the same word can be used without the life and can be used to actually cause darkness, to stop people from the light. But it doesn't change the fact that words are needed for a large civilization. So the way it worked in China is that China became largely Confucian with some amount of Tao still left over, but it's largely Confucian as best as I understand. Again, my understanding of China is very poor. But so everything negative that Tao says about the words is basically warning against wrong use of the words, but it doesn't fully define what's the proper use of the word. And for that, you have to go back, go to Gita, go to the Bible, the New Testament, in order to figure that out. And you have to be actually studying the words. Okay, I find that as much as I love, the English version of Gospel of John, every time I go into the Greek, it opens up something which is like an order of magnitude higher than what I had gotten. The same is true of Gita. And that's what you have to do. And you have to, I'm just asked, the thing is, I feel very strongly about this. Don't be put off by all the ways in which it has been used wrongly. Go and figure, if you think if you feel passionately about how badly it has been used, go figure out the right way of doing it. I think there is a core here, which is sound to the core in all these works. But you have to discover it, and you have to be committed to being sound to the core in order to do that. And if you can do that, then you have it. So that's my answer. Okay. Let's see. Anybody else wants to say anything? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark. And let me see. We have gone through everybody's comments. Let's see. And it's already 11 o'clock. Okay. So I want to give final kind of concluding comments for everybody. We'll start with Evanik. Evanik, what do you think of this meetup and how we have done this? What do you think? And anybody else would love to hear, even people who have not spoken, if you want to just talk about what you got from the meetup, how you thought it was, please let us know. Evanik.
I think this was great. This meetup gave me so much more to think about, and I'm gonna have to go back on some things because some things I wasn't fully clear of. And the thing is that I didn't even know what questions to ask to make me clear. So it was just kind of hard, but it was very interesting. I love, in general, listening in on stuff that I don't know much about, because I think I learned, even if it's on a very surface level, like just hearing the words. You were talking about how words are important, just hearing the words and hearing some of the concepts brought up tonight for the first time. It just really helped make you want to go deeper and make you want to learn more. And so I'm definitely glad that you record these, because I can go back and, try to understand. I think everybody brought up some really great points tonight. And I think this is a great way of doing it, like having people bring something to the table, bring their thoughts, bring what you liked about Gita. I think, I learned so much from what people are getting. So it was great.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. And I get to speak out my thoughts here, which is great. And because it's so difficult to kind of formulate this and to talk about it. So I find that just speaking it out and trying to address things, it's the best way of learning a little bit, because as you're speaking, you can get more things. People bring up all kinds of things that you've not thought of. So it's just wonderful. I love this format very much because it is so rich. People bring in whatever they want, and then they can add comments. All right. Anybody else wants to comment on the format itself and about the meetup itself? You're welcome to type exclamation mark. Joe, how was it?
I thought it was done very well. I mean, it evolved into a very deep discussion. And I thank you for your comments, because, I think that we think about the Gita and think about it more deeply. And then we can see how that evolves into some of the connections that we've made with other great works that we've studied. And I think that that's extremely powerful. I mean, just thinking about it and drawing out what you were saying is about how the Tao sits on, as the base for the Gita and for the Bible, and how those words are used. And those words can be misused, and they can be used for a proper way of interpreting the world. And so I think that that's a good thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. Nalini, how did we do?
It was beautiful. I'm sorry, I had a surgical procedure, so I was not able to talk or participate. But I participated by listening to others and to you. It was really, really beautiful. And I think I have gotten attached to this group a lot. And it feels like a family to me. And I really wait for our discussions. It's just beautiful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Nalini. Speedy recovery to you.
Thank you.
Always wonderful to have you here. So folks, I want to tell you about what's coming up. This Sunday, believe it or not, we have 3 incredible meetups. I don't know which of them is going to be my favorite, but I can guess. It's at so this is Sunday at 2 p.m. Peter Berkman is going to be back. This is a meetup that I've been wanting to do for a long time. And, Peter used to be in New York. Now he's moved to Texas and he's been busy. So it has been postponed a lot, but finally we are doing that. It's going to be on the Gospel of John. And Peter is a scholar. He reads Latin. I don't think he reads Greek, but he reads Latin, and is very, very knowledgeable about this and really loves Gospel of John. And what we're going to do is that I'm just going to talk to Peter. I was planning to have, and I gave him the option, do you just want to have a conversation with me, or would you like other people to be there? So he says, oh, it's fine if other people are there. So I'll just talk to him about, we're going to just go chapter by chapter through Gospel of John. And he and Mark Stallman have discussed these in great amount of detail. So we're going to get his take on each of the chapters of Gospel of John. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to it for months. So I think that's going to be very good. At 5 o'clock, we're starting a new series on the greatest plays of the Western world. We're starting with Antigone by Sophocles. It's a way of actually, again, communing with different times, different ways of thinking, and it will open your minds just like it is doing for all the stuff that we've been studying. The caliber of the plays that we are starting out with. These are all classic plays. These are all ones that have shaped history. They have served not just, they are not entertainment. They have actually put forth ideas of what human beings are and what they can be, what they should be, what are the issues involved. This first series, the common thread through it is that it is really about heroic individuals faced with really tough problems. and what is involved in facing tough problems. We're going to start with Antigone. Then we are going to go to Othello, Shakespeare's Othello. Then we are going to go to El Cid by Corneille. And we're going to Don Carlos by Schiller. Then we are going to Saint Joan by George Bernard Shaw. And then we are going to Cyrano de Bergerac by Rostand. It's an amazing set of heroes and heroines. Antigone, which is what we are starting out with, is it's my absolute favorite Greek play. It has one of the strongest female character in plays that you have seen. And the style of Greek plays is very stunning. If you've not seen a Greek play, or if you've not read a Greek play, please join us. It can be read very quickly. That's the great thing about the plays. We will be able to cover one play per meetup, and it can be read in maybe 2 to 3, 4 hours, something like that. So I encourage you to read, and even if you don't read, come and attend. I think you'll get a lot of value from it. And again, Phil is going to be leading it. Phil has exposed us to such amazing literature, and he is so good at doing this. So we're going to have something spectacular. Evanique.
Just really quickly, Antigone, you can find different enactments of it on YouTube. I did one today, and I think it was like an hour and a half-ish.
Yes.
So, if you don't have time to dedicate to reading the play, which I would recommend, you can also look at it on YouTube.
Absolutely. Evanique, if you liked the version, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. Folks, what I would recommend is that choose one which is like original versions, closer to the original version instead of adaptions. One of my favorite versions that I've seen, I don't know whether it is available on YouTube, is actually them trying to recreate the old Greek way of saying the words, which is Greek was spoken in this sing-song way, almost chanting way. And they tried to recreate the original Greek with subtitles. I'd seen it a long time ago, but any is good. If you can, for plays, it's actually better to watch a play than to read it. So please use YouTube, find a version that you like, and hope you can join us. So that's going to be at 5 p.m. on Sunday. At 9 p.m. on Sunday, we have Bucky meetup, and this meetup is going to be really interesting. It's going to be Richard talking about social tensegrity. How do you take principles of structure that Bucky talks about and apply to social structures? It's really fascinating, fascinating topic. I don't know what Richard is going to say, but he's a very impressive character. And this is what he's been working on for a considerable part of his life, for decades. And isn't it amazing that somebody like that is going to come and talk to us? So, and that's true of Peter Berkman, and that is true of Phil. Okay, so it's going to be amazing set of meetups. So hope you can make at least some of them, and hope to see you there. Thank you very much so much. Thank you very much, everybody. Special thanks for Evanique. She's anchoring our, the Gita meetups. So she's the backup anytime I can't make it. And she keeps things running, just like Joe does for other meetups, and Maritza does for some meetups. And Jason does for some meetups, and Phil does for some meetups. It's just incredible having all these folks, because it's, as Nalini was saying, it is a great community that we have here. And I'm always grateful for everybody and how they interact with one another. So thank you so much. We'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. Good night.
Night.
Night.